Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Hitchcock back again with Post TRT Plan of Action. Stop Talking. That's the name of my podcast, and I've made some changes here, and I've made some changes I think for the better. I have put my son in charge of my podcast, and I think my son's going to be able to do a great job. He put together the video that I just put up in my folder, which is on YouTube, which is a Black Male Crisis in America. And that Black Male Crisis article was actually put out in 2020 by the UN. And that article was put out just as the Biden administration was taking office. And as the Biden administration was taking office, they talked about the ratio of Black males that were dying at the time. And right before taking office, it was about almost 100 Black males in every 100,000 that was dying. But at the height of COVID and at the height of the pandemic, when there was a lot of violence, I know people remember that the Black males were dying at a 800 to 100,000 rate. Now, what happened with that? Did anybody hear about that? I have not seen or heard one speech by either the administration about, because it happened while Trump was in office, of course, and then the Biden administration took over right after that, and I heard nothing about it. So my thing is, will we ever have a situation where there's policy or anything that's put forward that tackles this issue? I think not. And the reason why I think not is because they just don't want it to happen. And the only way it's going to happen is that the Black male, ourselves, go into these communities and handle the situation ourselves. How do we handle the situation ourselves? We talk about a plan of action. Instead of talking, we're going to talk about a plan of action of how we go in these communities, how we change the economic conditions in these communities, how we change the violent conditions in these communities. There's a plan that I have. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, what kind of plan do you have, right? But it's something that I do have. I do have a plan that I want to put forth. It's a plan that I think that we can add to or take away from. I really want the critique. You can see what the plan of action is going to be, right? Because it's called Plan of Action Stop Talking. It's post, right? It's in TRT is the real truth. So what I plan on doing is talking to you about the real truth of what's happening and what's going on. Not this fairy tale type of situation where you try to look at everything from a positive and beautiful perspective. Yes, you want to have and put forth positive energy, of course, but you don't overlook things and try to mask things and make it better than it truly is. Like right now, the inflation is horrible, but I noticed that the prices are starting to kind of come down right as the election time is coming forth, right? So, but what happened to those other years when we was getting robbed and spending so much money in the grocery store, spending $300 and $400 and $500 at a time in the grocery store? But I digress. Let's get back to what I come here to talk about, which is the Black male crisis in America. All right. Now, at this time in America, I think that Black males could put forth a plan in a situation where we can become an integral part or the backbone of America by taking specific jobs and going out of our way to do specific things that can advance us in this society. At this time, we have a weak America. And I think that this is the perfect time for the Black male to advance ourselves into this society, to become the backbone of our society. And the way that we become the backbone in our society is that we take the jobs that are very critical to the infrastructure of America. All right. So those are the things that I'm gonna put forth in the plan. But if you think about it, we are weak. We're very divided. The most divided that I've seen since I've been alive. I know my mom has seen some division that's a little bit more than I've seen, and my grandma saw more division than she saw. But at this time, we're more divided than we've ever been in my lifetime. And what I'm saying is, if we as a Black male community could bind together and come together instead of bickering and fighting amongst each other, if we could do that and try to direct these kids to specific jobs, and jobs that was very, very high paying jobs like plumbing, electrician, very high paying jobs, a construction worker, site managers at construction jobs, things like that. If we can point them in the direction of those jobs and help them obtain those jobs by encouraging these administrations to bring back trade in schools, if we could get those kids to take pride in their work, all right? If we can get kids to take pride in seeing the work that they do and completing the work that they do and developing a work ethic, if we can do that for kids coming up, then we can take a better position in society. But as of now, we're bickering amongst each other. We're talking about, our young folks are talking about who got different colors on, and who's the blood on this corner and who's the Crip on that corner, and murdering each other for space that they think is theirs. But of course, it's not their space. It's not their space at all. They don't own it. If we can get these messages to the kids, and there's some kids that we're not gonna be able to save. There's some kids that we're not gonna be able to get through to. Right? Because I've seen it. I've been out there and I've seen some of these situations with these kids where there's nothing you can do to some of these kids. I was in prison with the guy, or I was in a county jail in Charlotte, North Carolina with the guy, and I talked to this kid day in and day out for about 80, 90 days, talking to him about, how it is that you're supposed to conduct yourself. All right. Although I was in jail, of course, I knew how to conduct myself. I was in jail for fraud. But I knew how to conduct myself. I knew how to talk to people or be very mannered. Right. I knew how to converse. I knew how to talk to the best of people and talk to the worst of people, because I came from where I came from. But I talked to this guy, and he was about 22 years old, very young. In fact, he was 19. I'm thinking about, he was 19 years old, and he was in there for robbery. And so 90 days passed by, and I just wanted to see, just like a test, to see how was he thinking? What did I have any impact on this guy's mind and his behavior and the way he thought about life? And of course, 90 days, you can't do much of anything, but I just wanted to see the things that he said. And did he have any remorse for actually pulling the trigger on this guy and shooting this guy? I wanted to see if he had remorse, right? And the guy died that he shot, right, in a robbery attempt. So in the beginning, when I first started talking to him, he was talking to me about how he coaxed this guy and befriended this guy that he knew had it, right? And when I mean had it, he had weight, he was pushing weight, he was getting a lot of money in the community. And this is a Charlotte boy. And I'm like, So what did you do to coax him? And he was like, I just befriended him a little bit, and he talked he talked and talked and talked, and the story culminated in crescendoed on, well, I just really befriended him because at the end of the day, I wanted to rob him. So the whole time that he actually befriended this guy with the intention of robbing this person and shooting him. Right? So there's a situation where we know we can't save everybody. We can't. There's some dudes that need to be in jail. If you don't believe it, if you spend some time in there, you will know that there are people that deserve to be locked up. Just period. There's some people that deserve to be locked up. Why? Because some of these people do not have a conscience. So yes, some should be locked up, and some, but there are some that you can save. And I'm gonna finish the story by saying this. I talked to him and I said, hey, let's just say I got $75,000, and you know I got $75,000. I'm going to the bank. You know I got it. I'm going to the bank. And you see me, you in a car, you see me, you know where I'm going, you know I'm going to drop the money off at the bank. What do? He said, I shoot you in the head and take the money. Just like that. He said, I'll shoot you in the head and take the money. So what I'm trying to tell you is there's people that we can't save, right? But there are kids out here that do not deserve to be ignored. There are kids out here that need some guidance and some role models that do not need to be ignored. And if we're going to do anything, we can start with those kids that before they're 11, 12, 13, and they start to get these ideas about what it is to be a man. If we can get to them before and show them what a man is, then we can help them, right? So this is the stuff that I want to talk about. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it today is because I just left looking at my nephew in a casket, right? I just left looking at my nephew in a casket. He was 21 years old. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, he's not innocent. And I saw it coming up. And this is my brother's child. But he was in those streets. And the nicest human being that you ever want to meet, and most respectful when he's around you, around his family. He loved his family, and he was totally respectful to his family. But when he hit those streets, he was as mean as you could possibly get, and as gangster as you could. He was thugged out, you know. But the thing about him is he had a beautiful soul, and that's the dichotomy of the black male, right? There's things that in the black male that, especially when you come from those environments where you saw violence, well, that dichotomy is there. That bad boy in you, and then the nice guy in you, because you know how to be respectful. He knew how to be respectful because he had a grandma raising him along with his mom. And then at times my brother had to take him in because he was getting a little too wild, right? But he would always want to travel back to his mom because he knew he could get away with things at his mom, or get away with things that he couldn't get away with his pops. You see, so what we need to do as black males is to show these kids some leadership and some manhood, what it truly means to be a man, right? It was something that it was very difficult for me to learn because I didn't have a father figure. I didn't have a father figure in my home. Right? So it's something very difficult for me to learn. It was very difficult for me to teach my sons how to be a man when it was very difficult for me to learn how to be a man. Right? So we're talking about generational things that become problems, but they they crescendo and culminate in violence and people dead on the street. So how do we change it? Right? So what do we do to change this whole situation? The first thing we need to do is get in these neighborhoods. Instead of sitting around talking about somebody else doing it, we need to get in the neighborhoods. Most of the churches that's in the neighborhood is scared to even go in the neighborhood. Right? So the preacher's sitting there talking about what's going on in the neighborhood, but won't even go in the neighborhood. So these are the things that we have to talk about. And just like I said, it's an emotional situation for me. Of course, now I have a nephew that's laying in a casket. Shot, had a situation where he was shot in the street, ended up getting in the car. It was fate for him. And it ended up wrecking and dying right there on the spot. Now, and I feel like a uncle that, that I failed as an uncle. So these are the things that's going on in our community. But how do we tackle them? How do we tackle these things? And if you start to think about it, all the situations, all the problems in our neighborhoods, all these situations, all the problems in these projects, when you start to think about the mountain of problems that we're dealing with and the situations that the mental health, the suicidal ideation, the violent thoughts, them looking on social media at the craziest, most ridiculous violent things on social media, black males that's 50 and 60 years old talking about gang violence, talking about each other, trying to fight each other, fight it out. We have rappers trying to kill other rappers. We got very, very sick cultural problems in our community that we actually don't want to deal with and we don't want to admit. We want to talk about the racism. We want to talk about all of this nonsense that's going on outside of talking about what we are doing to our community. All right? We don't want to talk about those things. All right? So of course, with all this joy in the world, you may not want to hear what I got to say, but these are the things that I want to talk about. Yeah, I'm an athlete. I talk about football and I talk about some of the things that I went through and how the NFL and I went to college and things like that. But this is what I want to talk about, right? Because these are the things that I'm passionate about. And these are the things that I'll be talking about going forward. But the first thing that I'm going to talk about in this journey that we're going to take together, all right, is the spiritual war that we're up against. That's the first thing that we're going to talk about, all right? Did you understand and do you know that Amun-Ra, that Amun-Ra that they say meant sun god, actually doesn't not mean sun god? Did you know that? Did you know that before some of these male deities came about, that female gods were dominant in religion, so to speak, right? That Isis, the Egyptian god Isis, the female Egyptian god Isis, was the number one god that most worshipped. That Ashereth, a female god, was worshipped, right? So females led in the deities in ancient times, right? But we today, it's male dominated. Why is that? Right? We're going to talk about why that is, right? We're going to talk about why that is. We're going to talk about some of the things in the Bible, like the book of Deuteronomy. Why the book of Deuteronomy is just a war manifesto. Yeah, I'm sorry to talk about it for some of you Christians, but it's just a war manifesto. It's just how to kill, rape, pillage, and plunder. And then they're saying God said it. So these are the things that I'm going to talk about. Now, it's for some people, it's going to be a little bit, a little bit touchy. Even for my family. My family's not even going to, I think some of my family is going to probably be turned off. But just like I said, this is about the truth. And the spiritual warfare that we're fighting, the spiritual war that we're fighting is a war that started long before we were even thought of. But how do we win this spiritual war? How do we come to understand who we are as human beings? How do we come to understand who we are culturally? How do we come to understand who we are historically? How do we? Well, we come to understand it by talking about the history, by talking about the religion, by talking about the spirituality. You can't shy away from the things that you hate to talk about. Oh, we can't talk about religion. Oh, we can't talk about politics. Oh, we can't talk about the most important things. Think about that. Think about that for a second. The most important things that in your life, that controls your life. Yes, I said controls your life. The most important things that you can talk about, you don't want to talk about it. Why is that? That's how they got it. That's how they made it. They don't want you to talk about it. They want you opposite. They want you on the other side. They want one on this side and one on this side, warring at each other, talking at each other. All right? That's what they want. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to explore some of the things that actually will be insightful to the spirit. All right? It'll be insightful to the spirit. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I came to talk about it. I want you to check it out. It's Black Male Crisis, the video. My son put it together. Give him a round of applause after you watch it. Oh, you did a good job. All right? But just like I said, he's taking over podcast duties. Another thing. CJ Williams, who was my podcast guy, does incredible work. He's out of Charlotte. I would recommend him to anybody. He does incredible work. He does great job. He has a lot of integrity. He's a great human being. And anybody in the Charlotte area, if you're doing a podcast, he's mobile. He'll come to you. He'll do your podcast. He's going to put out a great product. So thank you, CJ, for doing what you did for me in the beginning. But from here on out, it's going to be a Hitchcock thing. All right. Post TRT. We'll talk later. Peace.
In the United States, generations of young black males, ages 15 to 24 years, are prematurely dying from homicide and suicide. Between 1950 and 2010, the average death rate for young black males due to homicide was 81.7 per 100,000, and suicide was 11.8 per 100,000. Ages 15 to 24 years are the intersecting developmental stages of adolescence and young adulthood when premature death should not be expected. The trauma and ceased procreation prospects stemming from black males' premature deaths represent a public health crisis in America. Heightened public health approaches are needed to bring attention to a young racial gender group that is dying 5 to 6 decades prior to their life expectancy. The mass suicide, homicide killings, premature deaths, and death disparities among young black males, ages 15 to 24, in the United States is not a paranoid propaganda. It is undeniably a disturbing public health crisis that requires an urgent national response to reverse and ultimately eradicate the premature death of young black males. Globally, premature death is a major public health concern that impedes the improved life expectancy of human beings. However, premature death incidents and death disparities differ among population groups. In this article, death disparities are defined as the preventable variances in the incidence and prevalence of deaths, and the affliction of death and dying exposures that exist among specific population groups. Systemic inequalities, socioeconomic status, education, and geographic locations have been found to influence premature death disparities among marginalized populations. Racial, ethnic, gender, and age gaps in premature deaths remain a public health crisis. Based on public health life expectancy projections, death at the age of 15 to 24 is considered a premature death in the United States. Premature deaths have instantaneous effects on procreation and birth rates, family history, generational prospects, and cultural demographics. In the United States, persons of color and males have higher premature death rates than white non-Hispanics and females. Black males, ages 15 to 24, have lower life expectancy than their white non-Hispanics counterparts. Death defined. The premature deaths of young black males correlate with the male absence of fathers, brothers, uncles, sons, nephews, and cousins among black families. The loss of black males in the family has lifelong and traumatic effects on black family functioning. Examining age-specific leading causes of premature death is key to A. Acknowledging the prevention needs, B. Addressing death disparities, C. Identifying determinants of premature death, and D. Decreasing the high homicide and suicide death exposures of young black males. Premature death due to homicide and suicide. According to the CDC, from 1950 to 2010, the average combined death rate for black males aged 15 to 24 who died in the United States due to homicide and suicide was 93.5 per 100,000. For those 7 decades, young black males, example, 15-24 years homicide rates were higher than that of black males of all ages. In assessing suicide rates for black males, there were only 2 decades, example 1950 and 1960, when young black male suicide rates were lower than black males of all ages. The normalization of young black males living healthy lives to old age across their lifespan should be expected. Young black males' premature deaths prior to 25 years of age should not be the societal norm in the United States. Nevertheless, death disparity research confirms that death rates of American teens and young adults, especially among black young males, dramatically increased due to homicide and suicide. Unfortunately, the frequency of homicide-suicide deaths of young black males has often masked the structural determinants of death and the socio-historical discrimination and generational implications influencing their deaths. The historically racial and genderized viewpoints that promote black males as violent criminals do not provide the space for understanding black male victimization, or the meaningful examination of physical and mental health challenges that can serve as contributing factors to suicide or the structural violence associated with their high homicide-suicide deaths. A lack of attention to male homicide-suicide based on traditional gender roles has contributed to males of various race and ethnicities to suffer in silence. Decades suicide disparities among young black males. While there are decades of evidence substantiating suicide rates among young black males, the exact reasons are not definitive. During the past 7 decades, young black males' suicide rates exceeded that of their 15 to 24-year-old counterparts. Highest suicide rates peaked during the 1980s, example, 20.2% suicide rate increase among black male groups, and 1990s, example, 22% suicide rate increase among black male groups during the Reagan, Bush, and Clinton 1990s presidencies. Furthermore, the enormity of suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts, and suicide in the black community cannot be understated, and it parallels with the community deprivation many blacks experience. For instance, from 1990 to 2003, suicide for blacks was the 16th leading cause of death and resulted in 28,177 suicides during this time. Bridge et al. Conducted a period trend analysis of national mortality data for the periods January 1, 1993 to December 31, 2012, with population focus on suicide in children aged 5 to 11 years. Bridge and colleagues' analysis revealed that while suicide among white male children decreased, conversely suicide increased for black boys during this period. Suicide by means of hanging and suffocation were the predominant method of suicide among all groups, yet as white boys' rate decreased in this category, data showed a marked increase in prevalence among black boys. While the suicide rate significantly decreased for school-aged white children, suicide for black children has increased, which may be lost when examining overall suicide data, i.e., unaggregated, which in turn masks disparities which exist. Most importantly, the researchers noted that there was a significant decrease in the suicide rate among white boys, from 1.96 to 1.31 per 1 million, and a significant increase in the suicide rate among black boys, from 1.78 to 3.47 per 1 million, that demonstrates the shift in trends.
I think it's like genocide. They want to see us kill each other off. They see the drug dealers selling the addict, and they watch them shoot up in their neck. They don't care about children. I pray for people, because you never know what walk of life a person went through.